Hi, in this video lecture, we will tackle about soil-plant relationship. For the outline of topics, we will try to discuss the following: the essential elements in soil and their forms, the profile distribution of elements, the roles of essential elements in plant nutrition, the biochemical classification of nutrients, the availability of nutrients, mechanism of nutrient uptake, relationship between soil nutrient supply and plant growth, the LRP or the linear response plateau model, the law of minimum or Liebig's law of minimum, the Mitscherlich equation, the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and sulfur economy in soils, and the cause of decline in soil fertility. Let's begin with a discussion on the essential elements in soils and their forms. For the essential nutrient elements, we have two classifications. The first classification is the macro elements, and the other one is what we call the micro elements. So for the macro elements, we have the following in the soil. We have the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. As these are the forms of the elements that are available for plant use. For nitrogen, we have ammonium and nitrate. For phosphorus, we have dihydrogen phosphate ion and hydrogen phosphate ion. For potassium, we have K plus or potassium ion. For calcium, we have calcium ion. For magnesium, we have magnesium ion. And for sulfur, we have sulfate. So, if you can notice, the available forms of nutrients for plant use are all in ionic form. It's either a cation or an anion. Now, for the microelements, these are the forms that are available for plant use. For iron, we have iron 2 plus or ferrous. For manganese, we have Mn2 plus or manganese ion. For boron, we have the boric acid or the hydrogen borate. For zinc, we have zinc 2 plus. For copper, we have Cu2 plus. For chlorine, we have Cl minus. For molybdenum, we have the molybdate. For nickel, we have Ni2 plus. And for cobalt, we have CO2 plus. Now, for the sources of nutrient elements, the essential nutrient elements can be derived from the following: from organic matter, minerals, air, and from water. For the CHO or the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, these nutrients can be derived from air and water. For example, carbon can be derived from carbon dioxide, hydrogen can be derived from water, and oxygen can be derived from oxygen gas and water. Now let us discuss the sources of some essential elements. Let's begin with nitrogen. The air partly supplies nitrogen. In fact, the air in the Earth's atmosphere is made up of approximately 78% nitrogen. The nitrogen from the air can go to the soil through biological nitrogen fixation, and when lightning converts it to nitrate. When the enormous energy of the lightning breaks nitrogen molecules and enables their atoms to combine with oxygen in the air, forming nitrogen oxides, these nitrogen oxides dissolve in rain, forming nitrates that are carried to the earth. Now, the major source of nitrogen is what we call the organic matter. The organic matter contains about 5% nitrogen. Most minerals in the soil do not contain nitrogen. Okay, so that's for nitrogen. Now let's discuss the sources of phosphorus. Phosphorus is released from soil organic matter. About 1% phosphorus comes from organic matter. They are bound in phytin, for example in the hulls of seeds, from phospholipids such as eggs, meats, fish, cereal grains, and oilseeds, and nucleic acids of vegetables. The major inorganic source of phosphorus in the soil are the acid-soluble P, the calcium phosphate, the aluminum phosphate, and the iron phosphate. For potassium, potassium is found in minerals like feldspars and micas. In the soil, 90% of potassium found in these kinds of minerals. It can also be found fixed inside of clay minerals. About 9% of soil clay is fixed or are fixed inside clay minerals, and 1% on the soil exchange sites, and 0.1% can be found in the soil solution. For sulfur, sulfur is contained in organic matter, about 1% sulfur. It can also be present in minerals such as gypsum and pyrite, and when released to the soil, they are in the forms of hydrogen sulfide, iron sulfide, and sulfate. There are other nutrient elements present in the organic matter at very low concentrations, and most comes from the weathering of minerals, such as calcium. Calcium is found in hornblende and plagioclase, dolomite, and calcite. For magnesium, magnesium occurs in hornblende and dolomite and biotite. Now, for the micronutrients derived from various minerals, we have iron. Iron is among the most abundant of micronutrients. Iron can be found in limonite, hematite, goethite, and other minerals. We also have chlorine. Chlorine is also contained in minerals and may also be supplied from the salt sprays from oceans and irrigation water. So that's all for the sources of nutrient elements. Now let's go to the roles of essential elements in plant nutrition. There are 18 essential elements in plant nutrition, and this table summarizes the 18 and their role in plant growth and development. For carbon, carbon is a constituent of carbohydrates, and this element is also necessary for photosynthesis. Hydrogen, hydrogen maintains osmotic balance, and it is important in numerous biochemical reactions happening in plants. And it is also necessary for photosynthesis. Oxygen is also a constituent of carbohydrates and necessary for respiration. Nitrogen, nitrogen is a constituent of proteins, chlorophyll, and nucleic acids. Now let's go to phosphorus, potassium, and calcium. Phosphorus is a constituent of many proteins, coenzymes, nucleic acids, and metabolic substrates. It is also important for energy metabolism. Potassium, it is involved in photosynthesis, carbohydrate translocation, and protein synthesis. On the other hand, calcium is a component of cell wall. It plays a role in the structure and permeability of plant membranes. Magnesium, it is an enzyme activator, and it is also a component of chlorophyll. Sulfur is a component of plant proteins. Boron is important in sugar translocation and carbohydrate metabolism. Fluorine is involved in oxygen production in photosynthesis, and copper is a catalyst for respiration and a component of various enzymes. For iron, manganese, and molybdenum, iron is involved in chlorophyll synthesis and enzyme for energy transfer. Manganese, it involves in the control of several oxidation reduction systems in photosynthesis. Molybdenum, it is involved in nitrogen fixation and in transforming nitrate to ammonium. Nickel, nickel is necessary for proper functioning of the enzyme urease and found to be necessary in termination. We also have zinc and cobalt. Zinc is involved with enzyme systems that regulate various metabolic activities. And last but not the least is the cobalt that is necessary for nitrogen fixation. So that's for the 18 essential nutrient elements for plant growth and development. Now let's take a look on the profile distribution of nutrients. Now, the set of mechanisms that shape the vertical distribution of soil nutrients can be grouped in at least four major processes. And these are the four. We have the weathering, the atmospheric deposition, leaching, and biological cycling. Now, the first two, the weathering and the atmospheric deposition, affect the depth at which nutrient input occur, while the last two, the leaching and the biological cycling, influence the vertical transport of nutrients in opposite ways. Now I have here an illustration that can help you picture out what's happening in the soil profile when it comes to the distribution of nutrients. Now, acting in isolation, leaching moves nutrients downward and may increase nutrient concentrations with depth. As you can see in this figure, the arrows indicate water inputs and outputs and vertical water fluxes at different depths. Now, decreasing vertical water flow with depth depletes nutrients from the topsoil and accumulates them in deeper soil layers, producing a peak at the maximum routine depth. So that's what happens in when there is leaching. Now, another illustration is this. In contrast, biological cycling generally moves nutrients upwards because some proportion of the nutrients absorbed by the plants are transported above ground and then recycled to the soil surface by lateral fall and true fall. Now, plant cycling should therefore produce nutrient distributions that are shallower or decrease with depth, according to this illustration. Now, as you can see in this figure, arrows indicate nutrient uptake, transport, and above ground cycling via lateral fall and true fall. Plant cycling tends to accumulate nutrients in the topsoil and deplete them in the root zone. Below the rooting depth, there is an increase of nutrient concentrations because there is no depletion. So that's for the profile distribution of nutrients. Now let's take a look on the biochemical classification of nutrients. Now this table shows you the classification of plant nutrients according to biochemical behavior and physiological function. Now, the first group, it includes the major constituents of organic plant material, the carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and sulfur. So these elements are constituents of amino acids, proteins, enzymes, and nucleic acids, the building blocks of life. The assimilation of all these nutrients by plants is closely linked with oxidation reduction reactions. Now for the second group, the P, phosphorus, boron, and silicon constitute the second group of elements with close similarities in biochemical behavior. All three are taken up from the soil solution as inorganic anions or acids and occur in this form in plant cells or are bound by hydroxyl groups of sugars to form phosphate, borate, and silicate esters. Now for the third group, it is made up of potassium, sodium, calcium, magnesium, manganese, and taurine, all of which are taken up from the salt solution in the form of their ions. In plant cells, they are also present in ionic form where they have non-specific functions. For example, they are involved in establishing electropotentials. Now, last but not the least, the fourth group. This group includes the cations, which are associated with diffusible or indiffusible anions. Example, calcium with oxalate or with the carboxylic groups of pectins in cell walls. We also have magnesium that can be found very strongly by coordinate and covalent bonds or chelation as occurs in the chlorophyll molecule. Now, the ability of magnesium, calcium, and manganese to form chelates means that these elements closely resemble those of the fourth group, the iron, copper, zinc, and molybdenum, which are predominantly present in plants in chelated form. This is an important function of these latter elements, that is to facilitate electron transport by valency change. That would be the first part of this video lecture. I'll see you again on the second part. Thank you.
This is the soil pH scale, including the availability of those essential elements for plant growth. So the shaded area with color gray indicates the availability of those nutrients to the plants in different pH levels. For example, nitrogen is becomes limiting when the soil pH is 5 lower than 5.5, and another example is that iron is becoming limiting starting pH greater than 7. So this that is how you can use this pH scale of soil pH relationship with nutrient availability.